Well, hello again, future family relatives. It's your old Uncle Jeff, great uncle, and great great uncle. Catching up with another vlog about the family. It's been a while since I've done a vlog. As you can tell, I'm in my new cottage now. Construction was completed, and I made a trip to Mexico since the last vlog. So now the old house that you used to see me in is being rented out to tourists. So this one is about Martha and Peter's life after I graduated from high school. I graduated in 1967. I worked at the Wilmer State Hospital as a psychiatric technician in that summer and the first summer after college. So after that, I didn't live in Olivia anymore. When I graduated from high school, the parents really downsized. They sold both stores, the Lake Cottage, their Cadillac, and became a one-car family with the little Mercedes they'd bought in Germany. Dad sold his drugstore to his partner Jim, but continued to work almost full-time for him. Mom sold Wingate's store to a chain from Albert Lee named Leuthold's, and she also sold them the Wingate name. Got some money for that, so she was clever. She didn't have a job anymore, so she created one. She became Olivia's welcome wagon lady. She went around to all the businesses and got them to donate prizes or discounts, and she had the coupons all printed at the Olivia Times Journal. Now Vern Pushing had retired and sold it to a fellow from White Bear Lake, actually, named Gene. And he printed up the coupons and all the stuff for her little packages and a description of the town, all for free. And she'd get the names from the courthouses and go around and drive up in the Mercedes, dressed nicely and welcome all these new people. And of course, many of them were in the service industry and more blue-collar families with a lot of kids running around. And sometimes they were more just interested in getting the package and having the old lady leave. So she ran up against the different aspects of society that she wasn't so familiar with doing that. In 1969, they decided to try Arizona for winters, so they went to Mesa and rented a single-wide manufactured home, stayed there for 2 months, I believe, and I went down. They flew me down from college so I could enjoy Easter break there with them. It was nice, get out of the snow. And eventually they started spending more time, moved into a larger manufactured home, a double-wide, and then in 1972 they were able to buy their own and have it placed on a lot right opposite one of the greens at Apache Wells Community and Golf Course. Because in Arizona landscaping was all xeriscape and mostly brown, they enjoyed looking at the green outside their window. The only downside is sometimes people would shoot balls into their house or on the roof. The next major thing in my life was I had graduated from college in '71 with a German major and French chemistry minor and started medical school, so I was in my second year of medical school in 1973. And in the spring, I finally came out as gay. My parents had never given me a bad time about it, but they must have wondered because I never dated anybody in high school or college or even in the summers. I had female friends, but never anything serious. So after a course in human sexuality at the medical school, telling me that being gay was okay, even though this was only 4 years after the Stonewall riots in New York City, where the drag queens finally had enough with the police abuse and fought back, I went to the townhouse in St. Paul on University Avenue in the Midway, and I met my first boyfriend there. I was living in a medical fraternity, so Joe and I decided to get an apartment. He was actually married in the process of getting a divorce, and he needed a place to stay, so we got an apartment in St. Paul, moved in together. Well, Mom was a kind of a suspicious, investigative type, and so she didn't just let it sit like that. She enlisted Judy and Tip to do some sleuthing and come over and see what the deal was. So with the ruse that Tip had something for work that was written in German that he needed me to translate, they came over to see the apartment. And even though we were all part of the family, we didn't typically go back and forth to each other's houses except on holidays. So they come over and hand me the piece of paper. I translate it to tip in the living room, and Judy looks in the bedroom and sees it's a one-bedroom apartment with a double bed. So, oh, okay, this is nice. Well, goodbye. So a couple days later, I get a phone call from Mom, summoning me back to Olivia. Let's get the cards out on the table, she said, just like she did when she confronted Verna about her affair with Lloyd in the first marriage. So I thought, okay, she put Judy and Tip up to that to come over and check out what's going on, and they have reported back to her, and I'm being outed way before I want to actually do it on my own. And so I drive out there, and they pounce upon me right when they walk in the front door. And Mom had taught me to be a strong person, stand for your convictions. She was a warrior type, and I saw how she did things, and so I modeled a lot of my behavior after, her and the way she ran her business. So everything they tried to throw at me, like, it's just a phase you're going through. I said, no, it's not. You remember that wedding when I was 4, and you asked me who I wanted to marry, and I said him, and you said, no, over there where the girls are. And I said, no, I want to marry him. She of course chose not to remember that, but I remembered it very clearly. And so I told them, with the help from having had the sexual attitudes course, so I had quite a lot of ammunition to refute everything they said, like, it's just a phase you're going through. I said, no, it's genetic, this is the way I was made. And then it became all about her. She could get very dramatic at times, and she goes, oh, I just don't know what to say. I just think I want to get in the car and just keep driving. And, being a Gemini and always having a little voice in my head making smart-ass remarks, I said, well, where would you go? Like Iowa or South Dakota or maybe Wisconsin? But I think you'd come back because, we all love you. She goes, oh. Didn't have much to say, and Dad was quizzing me about all the sexual antics that a gay person does, and I said to Mom, do you want to talk about this? She says, no. Anyway, so they were just totally confused, and I said, well, that's fine. And of course then they laid down the rules. Well, you're not bringing him out here. And I said, okay, that's fine, you don't have to meet him. I'll come out later in the summer. We'll have a Sunday dinner together. So I went back, and they didn't communicate with me for a while, but eventually they came around. So about 6 months after this, Joe and I figured out we really weren't real compatible because intellectually for sure we weren't, and you can't base a relationship just on having fun times in the sack. And so he took off with an older man. He had daddy issues, and I wasn't a daddy, so that was the end of that. And so I had an apartment lease I had to deal with. Well, my friend Jim Cohen from French class was a sort of a closeted gay man, and he was still living with his folks down in the Midway section of St. Paul, just behind the townhouse, incidentally. He needed to move out, and I said, well, let's switch the lease over to the apartment next door that's 2-bedroom. You move in with me, and that'll help me out. So he did in October of '73. And then at the end of October, Randy walked up to me in the townhouse and says, hi, I know you from St. Paul Ramsey Hospital. Well, he was in nursing school there, and I was doing my 3rd year medical student rotations at that hospital. And he had seen me at the townhouse and recognized me, and so we started dating. And he, after a few months, he kind of wanted to move in because he said, well, I've got my place and you've got your place, we could save money. And I was not ready to commit to anything because I'd been dumped by the first guy, so, which was good. But anyway, I had Jim. He was my insulation to having Randy move in. Well, finally by about June, July of '74, Jim said, Randy really needs to move in. You need to be together, and I'm going to move out and get my own apartment. And so, that made the decision. And of course, Randy was happy. And as soon as he moved in, I realized, that's the way it should be. And of course, we were together 26 years until he died in 1999. So, over 75 and 76, Mom and Dad let up on their rules, and we would go out to Olivia for dinners and things, but they still kept the one, well, if you're going to stay overnight, you have to sleep in separate bedrooms, which of course, it was their house, their rules. We thought it was kind of funny, but so we just never stayed overnight. We'd go out and drive back the same day, but they were getting to know him. And then in 1977, in the summer, Randy and I had the opportunity to have a 2-week vacation in Europe, and we could go stay with my friend Rudy, whom I'd met when I was working in the hospital over in Germany. And so we did that, and we had a schnauzer by then named Phoebe, so we took Phoebe out to Olivia, and Mom and Dad took care of her. While we were gone, Mom later noted that when Phoebe would jump up and scratch Dad's arms, that he would get bruises and sometimes bleed from it. And she thought, well, he's 82 and just has thin skin. So we come back and pick up Phoebe, and I don't really notice anything wrong with him. He was suntanned and he was out golfing all the time, but as it turned out, he was quite anemic. In September, they went to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, where they always went for their annual physical, and he had a low blood count, and further examination, he was diagnosed with acute myelogenous leukemia, or AML. And this is rare in older folks. It's more typically a leukemia of teenagers to people in their 20s and 30s. And it requires really tough chemotherapy. And even for them, there was less than a 50-50 chance of survival. So for an 82-year-old man, the chemotherapy would have killed him before anything. And so they gave him some alternative oral chemotherapy just to see if it would work, and it didn't. So we transferred him from the Mayo Clinic Hospital up to St. Mary's in Minneapolis. That's where I was doing my family practice residency, and the director of my program was a hematologist. So he took over Dad's care, and he remained there for the rest of his life, about 6 more weeks. So during this time, Mom moved in with Randy and me in our condo, and she got to know him really well. I remember the day of coming out, she said, well, you're never going to have another decent meal the rest of your life. And of course, Randy was a good cook, so he'd come home from work in the ER that he was doing at that time, and I'd come home from my residency, and she would drive home to our condo in St. Paul. She had to learn how to drive in St. Paul, and she would have a great meal, and she'd say, oh, this is just scrumptious. Randy's such a good cook. And I'd say, yes, another good meal I'll never have the rest of my life. We'd laugh at it. So Dad was nearing the end of his life around the first week of November, and about October 28th or so, we got the news that our neighbor Hannah Kazarowski had committed suicide. And she had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. You might remember Judy mentioning her as being kooky, a neighbor in addition to Bobby Robertson, when she was a teenager. Well, this had turned into schizophrenia in her later life, and Mike had to deal with taking her to the mental health center. And it was really rough last 5 to 8 years of her life living with her. And while he was out of town, she got in the car and carbon monoxided herself in the garage, and he came home and found her. So we told Dad. He said, oh, Hannah committed suicide. And I remember him saying, oh, I feel so bad for Mike. And everybody in town, thought the same way. They thought, well, but it was a relief because they knew how he had suffered, being married to her. So, but when we gave him the news, this strong thought entered my head from somewhere, and I thought, my goodness, Dad's not going to be around very much longer. And now Mike is a widower, and it sounds just like what happened back when Florence died and Lloyd took off. There were 2 eligible people in the same town, and now there are going to be 2 eligible people who are literally the same age, right across the street from each other. I wonder if Mom and Mike would ever get married. Well, of course, that's what happened. So about 2 days before Dad died, he had been in a coma, and all of a sudden, it was a Saturday, I remember, he woke up, and we came in that day, and he was sitting up eating breakfast after being in a coma, and Mom was thrilled. Oh my goodness, he's going to be okay. And he started talking about his funeral and who he wanted to be pallbearers and his favorite hymns, and where I would be at the church in Olivia, and they already had crypts purchased at Lakewood Cemetery in Minneapolis, and he wanted a little service there for the people in the Twin Cities to come. And Mom was saying, "Oh, no, don't talk about that. You're going to be fine." And so afterwards I took her out of the room and I said, "No, this is what dying people do. They wake up, they have a short lucid period, and they want to right everything with the world." And I said, "This means he's going to die." And of course, she didn't believe me. But I had seen this happen several times before, and of course the nurses agreed with me. And he ate lunch, and then later that afternoon, he was back in a coma again. And early Tuesday morning, about 2 in the morning, he died. We were staying there with him during this time, and Mom was sleeping in the sleeping room on the station, and I was sleeping in a recliner chair that was in the bedroom. And when he died, I actually saw his soul leave his body and go up through the ceiling. I'll talk about that in more detail in another vlog I'm going to do about all the psychic experiences I've had in my life. So I'd rather talk about that in more detail. So, we had the funeral in Olivia. It was very icy. Even people from nearby towns couldn't come, so it wasn't attended by as many people as could have been. And even our relatives from Wilmer couldn't come down. And later on in the afternoon, we were able to drive back to the Twin Cities. And of course, we had extra cars out there. We had Mom's car, and Randy had come out in his car, and I had my car out there. And Judy had driven Mom's car out from the Twin Cities. So we went back in 2 cars, and so we could take B along to the service that was held at Lakewood Mausoleum. And then Mom and B drove back home. And Randy and Judy and I, of course, stayed in the Twin Cities. She, got rid of his clothes and kind of closed up the house, and then had the place in Arizona, but she really didn't want to drive there by herself. Fortunately, the widow of the funeral director, Florence Dirks, wanted to spend some time in Arizona and offered to drive with Mom in the car. And so both women drove down, and Florence spent some time with Mom and then with some other friends in Arizona. So when Mom got back in the spring, and she drove back with Florence again, Mike Gazrowski started talking to her and sneaking over under the cloak of darkness down the golf course and around the back so nobody would see him. And they started having dinner together and striking up a relationship. So that will be in the next vlog about Mom's life with her 3rd marriage.